First up today, nothing is more embarrassing than sitting in a quiet meeting and having your stomach start growling. It's happened to everybody, but why does it happen? Well, what you're hearing is the sound of air and fluid sloshing around, kind of like in the wash cycle of a washing machine, according to gastroenterologist Dr. Patricia Raymond, who is an assistant professor of clinical internal medicine at Eastern Virginia Medical School. But it's not just coming from your stomach. The noise is also coming from your intestines. The noise is completely normal. It happens to everyone. But if it happens a lot to you and it really bothers you, the recommendation is to chew your food more slowly and be sure to swallow before you take the next bite. You might also want to avoid sugar-free food. You could be sensitive to fructose, which is present in some fruity drinks and sodas, as well as foods like onions and artichokes. Sorbitol, which is found in apples, prunes, and other fruits, and used in sugar-free candy and gum, could also be a trigger for that excessive noise. And if your stomach's growling because you're hungry, just eating something will quiet things down. And that is something you should know. The afternoon slump. It hits most of us around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And yes, coffee or a brisk walk can help, but you can actually prevent it with some bright light. Increasing your exposure to light between the hours of noon and 4 can help keep fatigue at bay. Now, natural light is best, but you can simulate it with a good bright desk lamp. If you get in the habit of turning it on after lunch, it helps reset your body's internal clock. You can also get a quick boost by staring out the window for a full minute, even on a cloudy day. And that is something you should know. Hi, welcome to Something You Should Know, our weekend edition of the podcast this week. Glad you tuned in. And I don't know about you, but I like driving. I've always liked driving. I'm not necessarily into cars that much. I just like to get behind the wheel and drive. And like everybody else, I develop certain driving habits. I'm sure you do too. But according to popular mechanics, there are a lot of driving habits that we develop and we stick with that are not particularly good for the car. For example, not using the parking brake. Not engaging the parking brake puts the entire weight of your vehicle on a little piece of metal in the transmission called the parking pawl, P-A-W-L. Using the parking brake evens out the load, and that helps the delicate transmission components last longer. And this is true even if you're parked on a level surface. It's still good to use the parking brake. Another one is letting your gas tank get below a quarter tank. A lot of fuel pumps stay cool by staying submerged in the fuel in the tank. So if you're regularly running at a quarter full or less, you risk speeding up the need for a fuel pump replacement. Revving a cold engine. Cold engine revving causes abrupt temperature changes, and that can create stress between the engine's tight-fitting components. And riding the brakes down a hill. This causes heat to build up in the brake pads and the rotors, causing wear and increasing the risk that they'll overheat and warp. As a solution, the best idea is to try shifting into a lower gear and ease off the brakes as you go down the hill. And that is something you should know. And finally today on Something You Should Know, the home field advantage. In nearly every sport, there is a home field advantage. Research has proven that. But does the home field advantage extend beyond the sports world? And the answer is a big yes, in a big way. 2 researchers conducted experiments with people in negotiating situations, and they found that the home field advantage applies here too. They found that buyers were able to get a lower price when the negotiation happened on their turf, and sellers were able to get a higher price when the negotiation happened on their turf. And it applies to negotiating almost anything. It even applies to asking for a raise. If you can get your boss to come into your office to discuss your raise, you could get up to 160% more than if you have to go into his or her office. And that is something you should know. Hi, welcome to Something You Should Know. So when you have to come up with a creative idea, Maybe it's a business idea, or you have to write a paper for school or come up with a theme for a party. Whatever it is, you probably have a process or a ritual you go through to come up with ideas. And if you do, you may want to add to that ritual going to a coffee shop. Why? Because of the noise. Researchers have found that the level of noise that matches the bustle of a coffee shop, which is around 70 decibels, spurs more creative performance than, say, the quiet of 50 decibels or the distracting volume of a blender, which is about 85 decibels. It turns out that silence is good for focus, but not so good for creativity. That noise level gives your thinking what's called processing disfluency. That is, a slight difficulty in your experience of processing information. That little wrinkle, that slight difficulty, rankles your thinking in a way that spurs more creative ideas. And that is something you should know. If you're one of those people who just can't help but stay up late, you're probably a genuine night owl. Scientists have determined that night owls are genetically different than intermediate sleepers and early birds. They studied the brains of all three types and found that night owls tend to have diminished white matter. Now, if that sounds bad, well, it is. Night owls are also more prone to depression, tobacco use, and problems with cognitive function. Now, the good news. Night owls tend to be more creative and productive than early risers and have more stamina later in the day. They're more analytical and better at reasoning and are more likely to achieve greater financial and professional success than the early to bed, early to rise types. And that is something you should know. Hi, welcome to Something You Should Know, episode 344. I moved not too long ago, so I've been reading a lot of things about home improvement and home ownership and all that. And I came across an article on a website called thefamilyhandyman.com that applies not only to people who are new homeowners, but really anybody that lives in a home. Had some great tips that everybody should be aware of. One of them is know where your main water shutoff valve is. When an emergency happens, that's not the time to start looking for it. So find out where it is now. In warm climates, the main water shutoff is typically outside, attached to a wall, and in colder climates, it's usually in the basement. Synthetic soap makes less scum. Synthetic soaps make cleaning your shower or bath a lot easier because they don't contain the ingredients that create that tough soap scum that's hard to get off. Any liquid or gel soap is synthetic, but most bar soap is standard soap. There are a few exceptions. Zest and Ivory soap are synthetic. It's good to keep in mind that burglaries happen mostly during the day. Most burglaries occur between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., and in many cases, the crooks get in through unlocked doors or windows. Don't automatically trust the labels on your electric breaker panels. You could get zapped. While those labels are a reasonably good guide, they're not completely reliable because you don't know who labeled them in the first place and when they labeled them. And in older homes especially, they may have remodeled the house and those labels may be obsolete. You don't want to find out the hard way. And don't leave your car remote in the car. A thief who breaks into your car can grab the remote for easy access to your garage. And it's easy to find your garage because the registration in your glove box gives the crook your address. And that is something you should know. We're getting closer to the day where you have to decide about a Christmas tree. And our family, for the first time, is considering an artificial tree. We've never had one before, but like many people, we're considering it because the cost of live trees is so high, and artificial trees look pretty realistic. It may surprise you to know that about 2/3 of people who put up a tree put up an artificial tree, and the reason most often given is that it's better for the environment. But that's not necessarily true. Real trees you'd put in your home are grown specifically to be Christmas decorations. They aren't really contributing to deforestation like you might think. Christmas tree farms usually grow 1 to 3 new trees to replace each one they cut down. keeping the number of trees balanced and generating more oxygen. There are other considerations, like the mess of pine needles, the constant need to water a live tree, and the fire danger of a real tree. Plastic trees can also burn, but they're usually sprayed with a fire retardant. Real trees can be recycled, whereas fake trees are made from plastic that won't be accepted by a lot of recycling centers, so the tree ends up in a landfill when it does come time to toss it out. So, there are arguments for both sides, and that is something you should know. Hi, and welcome to our weekend episode of Something You Should Know. And I want to start today by talking about email, because you probably spend a lot of time on email, probably waste a lot of time with email. So here's some advice, some expert advice that will help you cut down on the amount of time you spend on email. And it's from a guy named James Hamblin from theatlantic.com. And he claims these things helped him cut down on the time he spent on email in half. And first, eliminate the sign-off. There's no need to write, sincerely, best, cheers, or any of the other farewells. There's no need for it. And you can even skip your name in some cases because the email address makes it pretty clear who the email is from, so it's somewhat redundant to sign the email. It's really kind of a holdover from the handwritten note or the handwritten letter. Same thing with the greeting. You don't really need to say, "Dear Bob," because you sent the email to Bob, and Bob's the only guy that got the email, and so you could eliminate that as well. 3 sentences or fewer is his advice. The crux of any email usually doesn't need more than 3 sentences. If what you're sending is more than 3 sentences, you should probably consider calling the person instead. Check your email only 2 or 3 times a day. I don't know if I could do that, but he says it's not that hard, and in fact, the average American worker wastes 30 seconds every time they check their inbox. So if you think about all the times you check your inbox in a day, multiply that by 30 seconds, and you'll see how many minutes a day you're really wasting. He says even if you think your job doesn't allow you to check your inbox that infrequently, give it a try or cut down at least some. But if you give it a try, he says you'll be surprised how easy it is to get used to in time. And that is something you should know. Whether or not you're a great cook, or maybe you just boil water and make some pasta every once in a while, no matter what, I've got some expert tips for you that will make your cooking much better. They come from the website popsugar.com. First of all, protein, including eggs, protein hates heat. So if you've always ended up with overcooked and rubbery scrambled eggs, it's because you probably cooked them too quickly at too high a heat. Low and slow is the only way to get soft, custardy scrambled eggs. Next, almost every time you do make pasta, you should save about half a cup of the pasta water before pouring the rest down the drain. That salty, starchy liquid that the pasta cooked in becomes a crucial part to achieving a silky, cohesive sauce in most pasta dishes. Sizzling bacon on the stovetop typically results in splatters and often painful burns. And the tip is to roast bacon in the oven on a cookie sheet lined with foil so that the bacon cooks evenly and the cleanup is effortless. You'll never buy ground beef again once you start making burgers from sirloin tips rather than ground chuck. The flavor and the texture are far superior to plain old store-bought ground beef. And finally, and I love this one, and it's so true, any chocolate chip cookie is better with salt on it. When you take the cookies out of the oven, sprinkle them with just a little good quality flake salt, preferably, big flake salt like kosher salt, and it completely transforms the flavor of the chocolate chip cookies. And that is something you should know. Hello, welcome to Something You Should Know. You probably like music. I like music. Everybody likes music. We don't all like the same music, but pretty much everyone likes music. So it's pretty common when people are doing intellectual work, schoolwork, working at your desk at your job, to listen to music while you're working. So, what kind of music is the best kind of music to listen to while you're working or studying? None. Listening to music kills your productivity. There are thousands of studies that have proven this, and while listening to music may make work more enjoyable, it will always make you less productive. Always. What does work is to take breaks during your workday and listen to music for 15 minutes or so and totally immerse yourself in that experience. Then you'll come back to work feeling refreshed and more productive. And the type of music doesn't matter when you listen to it during that break. It's whatever you enjoy. And that is something you should know. You know those look-alike store-brand products? They're usually drug or personal care items, and they usually say on it, compare to, and then they list the name of a product that's usually sitting right next to it on the shelf. Of course, few of us have the scientific ability to analyze those products. However, Ron Robinson, founder of BeautyStat.com, says cosmetic chemists do, and he says in most cases those products are a nearly perfect replica of the name brand. There are no rules against making an exact copy of a product as long as the technology isn't patented. And it's easy to do for a cosmetic chemist. He has the ability to break down an original formula, find the ingredients, and reformulate them. And presto, you've got pretty much the same product for a much cheaper price. While it may not be true 100% of the time, it's probably worth trying the cheaper look-alike because if you don't like it, the store will usually take it back and refund your money. And that is something you should know. First up today, when you have to make a decision, an important decision, be very careful when you make it. And mornings probably are best. Even the wisest people don't make good choices when they're not rested and their glucose is low, according to social psychologist Roy Baumeister. That's why smart people don't restructure their company at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't make major commitments during the cocktail hour. And if a decision does have to be made late in the day, they know not to do it on an empty stomach. When your glucose is low, your brain responds more strongly to immediate rewards and less likely to prioritize long-term prospects. In conclusion, have a snack, maybe a nap, and maybe just wait till tomorrow morning to make that decision. And that is something you should know. Nothing will ruin the holiday season like getting sick with a cold or the flu. According to the New York Times, though, a study found that gargling with salt water can actually help protect us. In the study, people who gargled with salt water 3 times a day got sick 40% less than those who didn't. Apparently, that's because salt water reduces inflammation in the throat and flushes out allergens, bacteria, and other irritants. You just add a half a teaspoon of salt to warm water, stir to dissolve, and give it a gargle. And that is something you should know. Hey, and welcome to the weekend edition of Something You Should Know this week. Now that we're in the holiday season, people will start to decorate and get ready for Christmas. And if you have pets, there are some precautions you need to take. First of all, you've probably heard that poinsettia plants can harm pets if they're eaten. The truth is, though, that a human or an animal would have to eat a lot of those leaves for it to be a problem, and that's not likely because they taste terrible. So that's probably not a big concern. Snow globes, if broken, the glass could obviously be an issue, but so could the liquid inside. It sometimes contains antifreeze, which pets are attracted to and can do them no good. Pine needles are always a concern because if they're ingested, they could pose a puncture hazard to your pet's intestines. The Christmas tree itself can be an issue because if it gets knocked over, all sorts of bad things could happen. So make sure the Christmas tree is anchored and secure if you've got curious pets. And don't let them drink the tree water. It could contain fertilizer or harbor bacteria. And don't use aspirin in the water. A lot of people put aspirin in Christmas tree water because they think it helps prolong the tree, but it could make that water deadly if your pets drink it. And skip the tinsel. Cats are especially attracted to it, and it can cause major intestinal problems. And that is something you should know. You've probably heard that you shouldn't refreeze food, that freezing it once is okay, but after it thaws out, you shouldn't freeze it again. But why? Well, according to Bon Appetit magazine, the reason is twofold. First, in terms of taste, repeated freezing and thawing can turn your meal into mush. Due to the nature of dihydrogen monoxide, which is one weird molecule, water actually expands as it freezes, and that can rupture the cell walls of your meat and vegetables, and that can make them very unappealingly mushy. In terms of food safety, each time you thaw it out, it introduces new bacteria. Though freezing can halt bacterial growth, it doesn't necessarily kill every single type of bacteria. So for those two reasons, it is best to limit your thawings to one. And that is something you should know. Welcome to Something You Should Know. It's been pretty chilly in many parts of the country over the last several days, and in fact in many parts of the world over the last several days. I know here where I am in California it's been chilly, and we just, for the first time, got our fireplace going the other day. And really, who doesn't like a fire in the fireplace on a cold night? But there are some things about wood fire fireplaces that you may not know. Although fireplaces are often accused of causing pollution, when a wood fire burns hot in the fireplace, it creates very little pollution. A hot fire also adds very little heat to your house. Most of the heat from a hot fire goes right up the chimney and can actually suck more heat out of the house than it radiates back in. With a slow-burning or smoldering fire, less of the combustible gas actually burns. More of it just goes up the chimney as smoke and soot. So from the point of view of generating heat, wood-burning fireplaces don't really make a whole lot of sense. Hot fires send the heat up the chimney, smoldering fires don't produce much heat, and they cause more pollution. But they still seem like a pretty nice idea on a cold winter night. And that is something you should know. Days are shorter in the winter, and that does have an effect on all of us. A study from Brigham Young University revealed that the amount of time between sunrise and sunset influences everyone's mood, even more than factors like temperature, pollution, and rain. It's a common belief that rainy days make people sad, but that's not what the researchers found. They looked at something called solar irradiance, or the amount of sunlight that actually hits the ground. They tried to factor things in like temperature and rain, and those things didn't seem to matter. The one thing that was really significant was the amount of time between sunrise and sunset. And that is something you should know. Welcome to Something You Should Know. I am officially in the holiday spirit. We got our tree really early this year. We got it on November 30th. I've never, ever gotten a tree in November before, but it has helped us all get into the holiday spirit. And I always like to do something for people less fortunate than me this time of year. And if you're planning to perhaps donate things for the holiday season, I think that's terrific. But before you decide what to donate, here are some items that almost every homeless shelter needs. Diapers for big kids. Charity drives are flooded with size 1 diapers and newborn diapers, but they're often short on the ones for bigger children. So if you're going to donate diapers to a homeless shelter, go with size 4 and above. Every shelter needs clothes in extra large adult sizes because people come in all shapes and sizes, and they all need something to wear. 100% juice drinks and shelf-stable milk will never go to waste at a homeless shelter. Toilet paper. Now, this may not be the most fun and festive gift you could give this holiday season, but homeless shelters are always in need of toilet paper. Gift cards or just plain cash works. Call your donation center to see where they stand, but several have reported a preference for store gift cards or cash as opposed to physical items. That way they can shop for the specific things they need. And international calling cards always come in handy. If you load a couple of cards with a few hours of talk time, you might give somebody the gift of a Christmas Eve phone call back home, which could mean a lot. And that is something you should know. As you shop for kids' gifts this holiday season, you'll notice that on every toy box is an age recommendation. 5 plus or 8 and older. You've seen them. So what do they actually mean? According to the president of ToyTips.com, there are no real standards. The manufacturer, through its own research and testing, determines what is age appropriate for each toy. However, in the case of younger children, the age recommendation often refers to safety, especially when the toy has small parts that a young child could swallow. Here are some recommendations when you choose a toy for Christmas for a kid. When considering safety, don't think just of the child the toy is intended for. Always think of the youngest child in the house. If an older child leaves a toy out that has small parts, it could be a hazard for that younger child. Just as important as age is a child's interest and skill level. If a child has no interest or ability to use the toy, it's a total waste of time. And every parent thinks their child is smarter than most and can handle more sophisticated toys. But the age recommendations really are excellent guidelines and really should be followed. And that is something you should know.